Before listen, lock your door.
Subscribe for daily horror story.
First story.
I only meant to fish. That's how it started. Just a solo weekend trip in mid-October, back when the Blue Ridge still burned with color and the morning frost felt like nature's warning to wrap things up before winter settled in. I was staying in a tiny Airbnb cabin near the edge of the George Washington National Forest, one of those no-fi, solar-heated, half-handmade places that hip hikers love. The owner, a quiet woman in her 60s, handed me the keys with 2 words: avoid the hollow. I asked what she meant. She just shook her head and muttered something like, "It's always too dark down there." Then she walked away. I laughed it off, assuming it was one of those backwoods legends meant to add flavor to a place that didn't even have indoor plumbing. But when I checked the topo map, I saw the area she meant a small, hollow, unnamed, nestled between 2 ridges with no marked trail but a stream running through it. Looked like a perfect place to fish. So I went. It took most of the day to reach it. I followed the creek downstream, pushing through thickets and loose rock. The trees grew thicker the further I went. Sunlight narrowed into threads. Even at noon, it felt like twilight. By the time I reached the edge of the hollow, I could feel the temperature drop by at least 10 degrees. There were no birds, no bugs, no wind, just the whisper of water and the crunch of my boots. That's when I noticed my shadow was gone. Not faded, gone. I looked down. The sun still filtered through the canopy. I could see my boots, the leaves, the moss, but there was no silhouette trailing me, not even a faint outline. Then I noticed the trees. All the trunks were facing inward. I know how insane that sounds, but that's the best way I can describe it. Every tree seemed to lean subtly, unnaturally toward the center of the hollow, like they were listening to something buried there, like gravity had shifted. And then I heard whispering, not speech, not wind. It was like my own voice, echoing. Fragments of thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud. I should have turned back. But I saw the water, a wide, dark pool at the center of the hollow, as still as glass. And I thought, just 5 minutes of fishing, then I'm out. I stepped to the edge. Cast once, nothing. Twice, still water. Then my line snapped, not tugged, snapped, like someone cut it with scissors. I reeled in the slack and noticed the hook was missing. The line frayed, as if something bit through it. I backed away slowly. That's when I saw the rocks, arranged around the edge of the water-stacked piles, like cans, but not made by hikers. These were too symmetrical, too perfect, almost like they'd been placed as markers, all warnings. Some had bones on top, small bones, long, thin, child-sized. Then I saw someone across the hollow, standing still, half hidden in shadow. It was me. I was watching myself. Same clothes, same pack, same hat. Except he wasn't casting it. Shadow, either I blinked, and he was gone. The whispering came back louder now, crawling inside my head, twisting around my thoughts. I turned and started walking uphill, trying to retrace my steps, but the trail was gone. The stream had vanished. It was as if the hollow had folded itself over behind me. Then I saw the footprints, my own leading deeper in. I didn't run, I didn't know where to, so I walked. Hours passed. Light didn't change. My watch stopped. Eventually, I saw the cabin. My cabin. I nearly collapsed with relief. But something was off. The door was open. Inside, it was exactly as I left it. Everything was mirrored. Furniture reversed. Clock on the wrong wall. My boots sitting on the left side of the mat, not the right, and on the table was a photo I hadn't brought. It was me asleep in the woods, and standing over me in the photo was that same shadowless double, staring into the lens. I left everything behind, grabbed my keys, drove all night, didn't stop until I crossed 3 counties and found a gas station with people inside. When I told the Airbnb host what I saw, she didn't look surprised. She just said, "That place don't let go easy. Might follow you home." That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've moved apartments twice, changed jobs, cut ties with almost everyone. But sometimes I'll wake up and something will be off. Furniture reversed, lights already on, and sometimes when I look in the mirror, my reflection doesn't move right. Next time you find a place where the shadows vanished, don't step in.
Second story.
It's not on any official map. I checked. Moss Hill is what the locals call it, but there's no sign, no road, no mention in hiking forums. Just a word that passed through a tired old man's mouth at a general store while I filled my water. Botter, back in September of 2021, he saw the gear in my car and said, "You ain't going up by Moss Hill, are you?" I said I wasn't sure where that was. He didn't answer, just stared at me for a moment like someone staring through a dirty window. Then he said, "Things that walk in the mountains at night don't care what you believe, but that place, it remembers what you don't." I laughed it off, didn't even ask for directions, just nodded, thanked him, and drove to the ridge trail I'd planned to explore. It was a new section for me, somewhere between Boone County and the state line. I'd taken 3 days off work, packed light, and told no one where I was headed. Bad decision. One of many. I found the chapel on my second day. The trail had faded hours earlier, and I'd been navigating by compass and gut. The woods were thick, not quite overgrown, but not maintained either. The further in I went, the quieter it became like. The forest itself was holding its breath. Then I saw it, a white steeple, barely poking out through the canopy, twisted by vines in time. It looked almost like it had grown there, like the forest had tried to eat it but choked halfway. I should have turned back right then, but curiosity's got teeth, and mine had sunk deep. The building was small, maybe 30 feet long, with rotted steps leading to a door that somehow still stood. I opened it. The inside smelled like mold and burnt pine. The pews were covered in moss. What light came through the cracked stained glass windows fell in broken colors across warped wood. At the front was a pulpit split in half. Behind it, a small baptismal stone full of stagnant water and moss. And on the walls, carved in deep grooves through the wood, were crosses, not the neat kind. These looked angry, slashed, violent. I took out my phone to take a photo, but it was dead, battery drained. Strange, I'd charged it that morning, and I hadn't even used it. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A hymn, soft, off-key, like someone humming through a closed mouth. I froze. The sound came from outside. I crouched and peeked through a crack in the warped. Walland saw nothing, but the sound was real. Too close. I waited, breath held, every inch of me on edge. Then the humming stopped, and something scraped along the outer wall. I didn't run. I should have. But I didn't. I slipped outside, slow, careful, trying to stay silent. That's when I noticed the footprints in the soft, dirt barefoot, adult-sized, circling the church. Some went toward the trees. Others came straight from them. I followed. One set about 20 feet into the woods, just to prove to myself it was nothing. Then I saw the others, a circle, 7 figures, maybe more, standing, not moving, half hidden between trees, not speaking, all facing me. I didn't wait. I ran, didn't grab my gear, didn't take my pack, just bolted down the hill, brush tearing my legs, sweat in my eyes. But the forest didn't feel the same. Paths I had used hours ago were gone, landmarks out of place. It was like I had stepped into a different forest entirely. And behind me, faint but steady, I heard footsteps more than one set, and that damn humming again. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsed, beneath a low rock ledge, waited for dark. They didn't follow me there, at least not close, but I heard them circling, that wet sound of barefoot skin on leaves, the rustle of robes, or cloth, or something soft, moving just out of sight. At one point, I swear I saw a hand reach down from the rock above, pale, long fingers. It just hovered there. Then it retreated. I waited until dawn, then ran again. It took me 2 days to find the road. When I finally flagged down a truck, I must have looked feral, mud-streaked, bleeding, wild, dash-eyed. The driver didn't ask questions, just let me in and drove. When I told a ranger later where I'd been, he just stared at me and said, "Son, there's no chapel out there." I drew it, described it. He shook his head. "I've walked that ridge since I was 12. You go looking for ghosts, you'll find something that ain't pretending." I went back a week later with a buddy. Daylight, GPS, cameras, we never found it. The GPS glitched constantly. The terrain didn't match my memory. The woods felt ... different, clean, empty. But right before we left, we found a piece of stained glass half buried in the dirt, red and gold, still sharp. I don't hike alone anymore, and I don't listen to hymns, because sometimes when I hear one on the radio, something inside me remembers the smell of that place, the warmth of that breath behind my ear, the feeling that something old and holy had cracked wide open and watched me run. Next time you see a steeple rising from the trees, don't go in.
Third story.
I used to work maintenance for the state park system in eastern Kentucky, seasonal contracts, mostly trail repair, signage, and erosion control. Not glamorous, but it paid okay, and I liked being alone in the woods more than anything else. I'm not the kind of person who gets lonely easy. Quiet's always made more sense to me than noise. This happened in 2018. I remember because it was the last year I took any job near the county line past Shale Ridge. There's a stretch of land out there where the trails just ... vanish. The map says it's public, but no official work orders ever go through. And if you ask the locals about it, they'll give you that look like you shouldn't keep asking. But of course I did, because I'm stubborn and stupid. And at the time, I was trying to impress a girl who liked folk mysteries and old mines. Thought it'd be cute if I mapped out one of the lost shafts people talked about in town. You know, the kind with warnings etched into rockin' stories about lights under the hills. That's how I ended up by myself with a topo map, a flashlight, and a stupid grin heading into a place even the rangers wouldn't walk. It took about 2 hours to get off trail. The bramble was thick, and everything smelled like moss and wet copper. It wasn't raining, but the ground was soaked, like the hill was sweating. Eventually, I found it an old mine shaft half collapsed, nearly hidden by brush and low pines. The entrance was just wide enough to crawl through. Timber supports rotted, cracked in the middle like broken ribs. I should have turned around then. Every instinct in me was already tugging at the back of my neck. But I didn't. I took out my flashlight, crouched low, and crawled in. The air inside felt wrong, heavy, not just with dust, but with weight, like the darkness itself had massed about. 10 feet in, the shaft opened into a larger tunnel, probably 20 feet across. Someone had dug deep here. There were old rails embedded in the rock, rusted tools scattered across the floor, and a series of wooden support beams so warped it looked like the place had been melting for years. Then I saw the marks, HANDPRINTS, dottons. Of them, maybe hundreds, smeared across the walls in long strokes. Some small, some ... not all of them old, blackened, like someone had pressed their palms into soot or blood and dragged them down the wall. I took a photo, then I turned around, and the entrance was gone. It wasn't like it had collapsed. The tunnel behind me was still open, but when I walked back, I couldn't find the crack I'd crawled through. Just stone wall, seamless. I thought maybe I was disoriented. Maybe I'd taken a wrong turn or circled somehow. I marked the wall with chalk and kept going the way I came, except I never found the mark again. What I did find was another tunnel, narrower, deeper, sloping downward. At this point, I wasn't trying to explore anymore. I was just trying to get out, but every direction looked the same. Worn rock, glistening water, those long, ancient handprints. I kept walking. The air got colder. Then I heard it breathing, not mine, something deep, wet, like lungs pulling through thick water. Not close, not far, just present. I turned off my flashlight. I know how stupid that sounds, but in that moment, it felt safer not to see. The dark was total. For a long time, I just stood there, trying not to breathe, listening. The sound moved past me, slow, no footsteps, just breath and a dragging sound like wet cloth on stone. When it faded, I turned my light back on end. There were fresh handprints on the wall next to me, still wet. Eventually, I stumbled into a wide chamber. The ceiling must have been 30 feet high. The floor was uneven natural rock and collapsed timbers. At the far end was something I still can't explain. It looked like a well, but wider, perfectly circular, smooth stone, no rope, no bucket, just a dark hole that dropped straight down into blackness. Around it were candles, or what had once been candles, half-melted stubs. Some still smoked faintly, like they'd been extinguished only minutes earlier, and something was carved into the floor. I leaned down and read it. "This hollow does not end." I stood up fast and backed away. That's when I heard the whispering. Not loud, not clear, just threads of voice curling around the edges of the chamber. It didn't sound human, not entirely. Some syllables stretched too long. Others snapped like bone. I pointed my light toward the hole and saw eyes, too many, all small, all watching from below. I ran. Didn't know where I was going, just picked a tunnel and ran blind through stone and steam and rot. Something followed, not running, not just coming. At some point I tripped and landed hard, rolled over, light skittering, out of reach and in the faint red glow of my backup lamp. I saw a figure crawl from the wall. It didn't break through the rock. It stepped out of it, like the stone was water. I never saw its full shape. Only the legs bent backward like an animal, the hands too long, and the face just an oval of flesh, featureless save for a wide, pulsing slit where the mouth should be. It reached out toward me, and then it stopped, because something else whistled high-pitched, echoing down the tunnels. The thing recoiled and vanished. I waited for a long time before I moved. Eventually I found a shaft with light bleeding through a crack near the top. I scrambled, clawed, tore half my nails getting through it. When I burst out into the woods again, it was dawn. I never told the park rangers, never told the girl. I quit the contract the same week, packed up, left the state. I still have the photo on my phone of the handprints. Every so often I look at it, just to remind myself it happened, just to remind myself to never go back, because whatever was down there, it wasn't alone, and it wasn't finished. Next time you find an old mine hidden in the hills, don't go in.
Fourth story.
I didn't go up there looking for anything. I was just trying to take some time off the grid. I'd been laid off 2 months earlier, split with my girlfriend shortly after, and had spent too long pacing around the apartment pretending I wasn't falling apart. A friend from grad school suggested a solo backpacking trip through the northern edge of Monongahela. National Forest said it helped him clear his head during a rough patch. He sent me a GPX file and said, "You'll barely see a soul, and there's an old ranger cabin halfway up. If the weather turns bad, I should have asked more questions." I started the hike mid-September. The forecast was clear. The leaves had just started to turn, that kind of burnished gold you only get in the high Appalachians. I parked off an old service road that looked like no one had driven down it in years, shouldered my pack, and headed south into the woods. The first day was gorgeous, quiet. I passed a few deer, spotted a black bear in the distance, but nothing out of the ordinary. No other hikers, just me and the mountains. The trail was a faint one, but I'd preloaded the map and it tracked well enough. My plan was to spend 2 nights out there, maybe 3 if I found the cabin. I didn't expect it to find me. Around dusk on day 2, the air changed. I know how that sounds, but I don't know how else to describe it. The silence became heavy, like the trees were pressing in, like sound had been swallowed up entirely. No birds, no insects, just the soft crunch of my boots and the increasingly loud rhythm of my own breathing. That's when I saw the wire. A single strand of barbed wire, stretched low across the Trelancle height, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. It stopped me in my tracks. There was no reason for it to be there. This wasn't farmland, and no current ranger operation would set up a trap like that. My first thought, hunters, maybe illegal ones. Maybe they'd rigged it as a warning or a way to keep people out. Either way, it gave me enough of a chill that I backed off the trail entirely and decided to make camp about 300 yards, off path on a flat rise. I didn't light a fire that night, just made a cold meal, zipped up my bag, and tried to sleep. Sometime after midnight, I saw the light. It was soft at first, like a lantern, not flickering, just glowing. And it wasn't from the sky, it came from the trees. I peeked through the mesh of my tent and saw it maybe 100 feet downhill, too close for comfort. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't stationary either. The trees around it looked oddly distorted, like their shadows bent toward it, not away. I stayed completely still. The light didn't come closer, but just before it blinked out, I swear I saw a figure standing behind it, not holding it, just there. UNMOVING. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I decided to cut the trip short. The forest didn't feel the same. It wasn't just paranoia, it was emptier somehow. The path back felt unfamiliar, even though it should have been simple. Fallen trees that I didn't remember crossing, rock formations that looked twisted and wrong. I kept checking my GPS, but it glitched every couple 100 feet, showing my position jumping between points. Around mid-afternoon, a storm rolled in out of nowhere. I saw the clouds stacked fast over the ridge and knew I wasn't going to make it out before the rain hit. That's when I remembered the cabin my friend had mentioned. It wasn't far. I turned south and followed the alternate trail toward the coordinates he gave me. It showed up maybe an hour later, tucked into a thicket of evergreens. I almost didn't see it. The place was half buried in moss, wood warped and sagging. The porch steps had collapsed inward. The door was cracked open slightly, like it had been waiting. My gut told me to keep walking, but the sky was already dark and the wind screamed through the branches like something alive. I stepped inside. The interior was dust-choked and stale. Old ranger gear still lay scattered around torn maps, rusted cans, a wood stove stuffed with ash. But the thing that hit me first was the smell. Not rot, not mildew, not metal, like blood or rust. Strong and sharp. I chalked it up to the damp air, closed the door, and barricaded it with a plank I found in the corner. There were no lights, no power, but I had a flashlight and a headlamp, and I set both down facing the room. That's when I saw the wall. Dozens of photos were pinned to the boards with rusted nails. Most were old Polaroids and faded prints, but one was recent. I recognized the subject immediately. It was a man with a red jacket and a black hiking pack, the same gear I'd seen listed in a missing persons bulletin the week before. The photo was dated 2 weeks ago. That hiker had vanished last year. I backed away, heart pounding. My flashlight flickered. Then I heard it again, that soft hum, but now it was closer. Inside the cabin, I turned and aimed the light toward the back hallway. Nothing but the humming grew louder. It sounded like someone was breathing, deep and slow, just out of sight. Not panicked, just watching. I drew my pocket knife. It was the only weapon I had. That's when the light came back. Not mine, the same glow I'd seen the night before now. Behind the cracked window, I bolted out the back door. Didn't even look to see if anything followed. I ran into the woods, storm pounding down now, soaked to the bone, branches slicing my face and arms. I didn't care, I just wanted to get away. I spent the next full day trying to get back to the main road, bushwhacking through terrain that made no sense. The GPS was useless. Twice I circled back to the same stream even though I swore I was heading in a straight line, and then deep in the trees. I found another barbed wire line, but this one was wrapped with old photographs like they'd been pinned to it. All of them were of hikers, some sleeping, some looking directly at the camera, some blurred around the edges like they'd been in motion. In one of them, I swear I saw myself, same jacket, same pack, same notch, in the zipper I'd broken that morning. That photo hadn't existed. Until today, I kept moving. Eventually, I made it back to the Forest Service road. A group of rangers found me walking in a daze, covered in cuts and mumbling about lights. They gave me water. One of them called in a report, but the moment I mentioned the cabin, they went silent, said there weren't any operational structures out there when I showed them the coordinates. They told me that place had been condemned since 1993 after a ranger went missing. No one had used it since. I asked about the photos. They didn't answer, just exchanged looks. Back home, I checked the missing persons reports again. 2 new names had been added that week. Both hikers, both vanished in Monongahela. The last place either was seen, within 5 miles of that cabin. I still hike sometimes, but never alone, never without a map, made of paper, and never in that part of the mountains. Because I know now, something out there watches, follows, waits. And if you see the light, it's already too late. Next time you see a cabin with the door open, don't go inside.
5th story. I should have trusted my gut the moment I saw the sign. It was just a sliver of wood nailed to a crooked post at the edge of the trail, half rotted and barely legible. The words, carved deep with a pocket knife, or maybe just a sharp stone, read, "Don't go over the ridge after dark." I chuckled, because of course it sounded like something straight out of a campfire story. But that's the thing about Appalachia folklore and geography blend like fog. And trees. Everything feels old out there. Everything feels like it's watching was 3 days into a solo hike through the Tennessee section of the mountains, tracing an old coal mining route I'd read about in an obscure online forum. Batter. I wasn't looking for trouble, just solitude. The kind you can't get unless you're 20 miles from the nearest road and the only sound is the weight of your boots pressing into soft earth. I'd mapped out most of the route myself using old ranger survey maps and miners, journals posted online. There was supposed to be a shortcut, a ridgeline trail that connected to forgotten fire roads and past the edge of a collapsed mine shaft. According to everything I'd read, no one used it anymore, which made it perfect for me. I found a sign at the entrance to that ridge, and I ignored it. The ridge trail was narrow, steep drop on the left, thick trees to the right, but the view, incredible. The sun dipped low behind layers of darkening peaks, and the air turned heavy and blue. Hiked until twilight, then found a small patch just big enough for my tent. There were no clearings on this part of the trail. The trees seemed older here, taller, and somehow quieter, like the woods were holding their breath. I cooked a small meal, didn't bother with a fire, and crawled into my tent around 9. Just as I was about to doze off, I heard something strange. It wasn't footsteps, not at first. It was humming low, monotone, like someone trying to match the pitch of the wind. It started distant, barely audible over the rustle of the trees, then slowly grew closer, not louder, just nearer. I held my breath, heart knocking, hard against my ribs. I reached for the flashlight, but I didn't turn it on, just waited. Then the humming stopped. A minute passed, then another. I finally unzipped the tent, just a crack, and peeked outside. Nothing but forest. But when I turned to zip the flap closed again, I saw it, a shape about 20 feet away, standing just behind a tree. Not moving, not swaying like a branch or shifting like a deer. Just standing. I couldn't see the face. Couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman or even fully human. It looked wrong. Off-kilter, the limbs were too long, the torso too narrow then, as if sensing I had seen it. It stepped back and vanished behind the tree. I bolted the tent shut and stayed up. The rest of the night with the knife in one hand and the flashlight in the other. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was a dream, a shadow trick, maybe a tall tree stump and too much adrenaline. The ridge messed with perception. I'd read that before, how isolation and thin air and silence can make the brain do funny things. I packed up and hiked hard. I was determined to get off that ridge by midday. I didn't make it. Around noon, I twisted my ankle on a patch of loose shale. It wasn't broken, but every step felt like walking on splinters. The trail kept climbing, and the incline only made it worse. I had no choice but to stop, set up camp again early, and rest a leg. I found a shallow notch between two rocks that gave just enough shelter from the wind, and unrolled my sleeping bag, trying to calm my nerves. That's when I noticed the carvings, dozens of them, scratched deep into the stones and trees around the notch. Some were just shape spirals, crooked X's, single eyes, but others were words. I recognized one phrase, repeated in 3 places. I tears you when you think. Another said, KEEP, your head down. Don't hum. I backed away, heart pounding again. These weren't casual etchings. They were frantic, scraped so deep the bark bled. I stayed alert the rest of the afternoon. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper. Every rustling leaf made me flinch at dusk. I started to hear it again, the humming. This time it came from above me, not below. I looked, and saw movement near the edge of a tall boulder. A head, just peeking over the rock, like someone crouched on the other side, watching. I didn't sleep. I see OULDN single quotes instead. I kept my head low and held the blade steady, eyes fixed on the mouth of the trail. But the creature, man whatever it was, never came closer. It just kept humming, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, sometimes so low I couldn't tell if it was inside my ears or out in the trees. When the sun came up, the humming stopped. I tried walking again, even with the pain. My goal now was simple: get off that ridge. About 2 miles down, I passed the collapsed mine shaft. The wooden beams were black with rot, half buried under moss and mud. But that wasn't what froze me. It was the clothesline, strung between 2 trees, with dozens of items hanging from it. Not clothes, exactly pieces of gear: a cracked headlamp, a child's hiking boot, a paracord bracelet, an old compass, a flannel jacket torn to ribbons. Every item was soaked, weathered, as if it had been hanging there for years, and beneath them, lined in the dirt, were stones arranged like graves, small ones, human-sized. Some were fresh. I didn't think I ran. Pain shot through my leg, but I didn't care. I bushwhacked off the ridge trail entirely, choosing instead to drop down a steep slope that would eventually take me to the road. I slipped, fell, cut my palm on a rock, but I kept going. For hours, I followed the sounds of water until I finally saw the glint of a stream, then a footbridge, then the edge of a gravel path used by the rangers. I didn't stop until I saw a trail marker and collapsed beside it, gasping like I'd broken the surface of a deep, dark lake. I flagged down a passing truck 2 hours later, driven by a pair of surveyors from the Forest Service. They looked me over, asked if I was all right. I told them I'd gotten turned around, twisted my ankle. I didn't mention the man on the ridge, or the carvings, or the humming. I didn't think they'd believe me. Hell, I'm still not sure I believe me. Back home, I looked up old newspaper archives from the county near the ridge. I found 3 missing persons from the past decade, all hikers, all last seen heading toward that same ridgeline. The reports noted poor weather, injury, or unreliable witness accounts. But I knew better. I still hear the humming sometimes, especially when it's quiet at night. I try to tell myself it's nothing, just wind, just memory. But deep down, I know. Something lives on that ridge, and it listens. Next time you see a trail with no footprints, don't be the first to follow it. 6th story. I'd always considered myself a pretty grounded guy. Rational, calm, under pressure, not the type to scare easy. I've been an EMT for 10 years, served for years as a combat medic before that. I've seen the worst of people, the worst of accidents, so I figured nothing out in the woods could really rattle me until last October. I was taking a solo trip through a lesser-traveled stretch of the Appalachian Trail that cuts through western North Carolina. I had 6 days off, and I needed to get away from the city, the sirens, the cramped apartments, the 24-hour adrenaline of emergency work. I'd done some research ahead of time and mapped a route that would take me through some deep back kit. It followed the remnants of an old Forest Service road, then past an abandoned fire lookout tower before looping back to a ranger-maintained trail. I figured I'd hike during the day, camp just off trail, and clear my head in the quiet. Just me, the mountains, and the cold. The first few days were everything I'd hoped. Leaves glowing red and orange under an overcast sky, the smell of pine and moss, and that hush that comes when you're miles from anything man-made. No people, no signal, just wilderness. On the third evening, I set up camp about a quarter-mile, toned downhill from the fire tower. It was nothing more than a rusted skeleton, now no stairs, just metal bones rising up out of the ridge like a broken spine. I figured it'd be a cool landmark before I turned south toward the next trail. That night was colder, the kind of cold that gets in your teeth. I built a small fire, made a dehydrated chili pouch, and sipped bourbon from a tin flask. I sat there a long time, staring into the fire until the forest faded into shadow, and then I saw it, a light faint, maybe 200 yards off, tow through the trees, a soft yellow glow, like a lantern swaying back and forth. At first I thought it was another hiker, someone making camp late, but the light moved strangely, too smooth. It didn't bob like a flashlight or flicker, like a fire. It glided, then it stopped. I stood up, took a few steps toward the edge of the clearing, squinting till the trees swayed in the wind, but the light didn't move, just stayed there like it was waiting. I called out, "Hello." No answer. The light went out. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept waking up thinking I'd heard something, twigs snapping, dry leaves rustling like footsteps. But every time I unzipped the tent and looked out, the woods were dead still. By morning, I told myself it had just been some strange optical illusion, maybe headlights from a distant road, or even a lightning bug catching firelight. I packed up, hiked fast, and didn't stop until I was 6 miles past the tower. That night, I camped near a wide bend in the trail beside a shallow ravine. I ate quickly, set no fire, and tried to convince myself I was fine. Around 1 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Then the light returned. This time it was closer, maybe 50 yards away, just outside the circle of trees. I held my breath, trying to stay perfectly still. But the light began to drift. Left, right, almost like it was searching. I reached for the pistol I always kept in my pack. I didn't yell this time. Something about the silence felt fragile, like if I made a sound, I'd break something I wouldn't be able to fix. The light paused. Then it blinked out. I stayed up the rest of the night. Back to a tree, pistol in hand. The next day I made the decision to head back early. I rechecked my map and calculated a faster route using an old service path that would cut 3 miles off my exit. Bad decision. The path was overgrown, barely visible. I followed it downhill into a narrow gorge where the trail twisted beside a dry creek bed. I hadn't seen any markers in hours. Then I saw the bones. At first I thought it was a deer, but the shape was wrong. Smaller, more human. Bits of cloth still clung to the remains. A tattered red plaid shirt, faded blue jeans, a rusted camping fork sticking out of the dirt beside it. My stomach turned. I took a photo with my phone, marked GPS coordinates, and made a mental note to report it when I got back. I turned around. The lantern was back 10 feet away, just hovering in the air behind a tree. I could see the edge of something behind its shoulders, maybe, a figure, but the shadows were too thick. The light flickered slightly, but not like it was dying, like it was breathing. Then I heard a voice, not loud, not whispering, just flat. "You're not supposed to see this." I didn't move. The light went out. I ran for what felt like hours, not caring if I was on trail or not. Branches tore at my arms, roots grabbed at my boots, but I didn't stop. The forest blurred. The cold didn't matter. The terrain didn't matter. I just needed to get away. Eventually, I stumbled into a clearing with a broken-down hunter's blind. I ducked inside, bolted the wooden door, and waited for daylight. I must have passed out, because when I opened my eyes, the sun was high. I stepped out slowly, checking every tree. Nothing. No light, no footprints, just birdsong and wind. I found the trail again that afternoon and followed it until I reached the ranger station near the southern trailhead. I told them about the bones, Gave, gave them the coordinates, filed a report. 2 weeks later, I got a call. They found the remains. All right. Belonged to a missing hiker named Josh Kaler. Went off-grid in 2016. Last seen heading toward the old fire tower. But here's the thing. They also found another set of prints around the site. Barefoot, deep, adult-sized. No shoes, no gear. Just one set, circling the remains, clique, like someone had been watching. I haven't gone back since. I still hike, but not alone. Not in that part of the country, and I don't sleep near fire towers sometimes. When I wake up late at night, I swear I see a faint glow through the trees, outside my house. Yellow, swaying dot, just waiting dot next time you see a lantern in the woods. Don't follow it. 7th story, Kai. I was 31 when I decided to take a break from people. It wasn't a breakdown or anything dramatic like that. Just a slow wearing down of my nerves work, emails that never stopped. Relationships that never lasted. The constant noise of city life that never let me sleep, Cart. So, I took a few weeks off and packed up my Jeep, intent on hiking and camping solo through a forgotten corner of the Appalachian Mountains, where the map thins and cell service dies. I'd always felt drawn to those mountains. My grandmother was born in a holler near Bluefield, and she used to tell me stories so vivid they clung to the walls of my mind like damp wallpaper stories of voices in the fog, of footsteps in snow when no one else had been around for days. I didn't believe them as a kid. As an adult, I didn't know what to believe, but something in me needed the quiet. I wanted to feel small again, the way only those mountains can make you feel. I found a spot deep along an old logging road, near a dry creek bed. The trail was almost invisible, choked by brambles and downed limbs, but my topo map said it used to connect to forgotten towns back in the coal boom days. Nobody had come this way in years. That was perfect. No people, no interruptions. Just trees, rocks, wind, and time. I set up my tent near a low bend in the creek, where the water trickled faintly beneath smooth stones. The air was still warm for mid-autumn, but the nights dipped low, and the chill settled in your bones like something personal. The first night was peaceful. I cooked over a small fire, sipped from my flask, and listened to the forest breathe. Death, deep, rhythmic hush you only get far from civilization. When I finally laid down, I fell asleep fast, but sometime just before dawn, I heard it. A voice, quiet, almost a whisper. Help me. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The kind of half-lucid noise your brain makes when you're barely asleep. But I sat up fast, my heart already racing. My flashlight was within arm's reach. I scanned outside the tent, nothing. Just mist curling low over the ground. Then I heard it again. Clearer this time, closer. Help me. It sounded like a child. Now I've been in the backwoods long enough to know that when something sounds like a child where no child should be, you don't follow it. Your brain wants to help. Your instincts don't. But I stepped out anyway. Just a few feet, just enough to look. There was no one there, but there were wet footprints. Small ones, clack, like a barefoot kid had come up from the creek. They led right to my tent, then vanished. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I debated leaving, but stubbornness won out. I told myself it was a trick of the fog, the cold, the isolation key. I packed up my gear and decided to hike up the ridge. If I could make it to the overlook my map marked, I'd have a better idea of the area. The trail had all but disappeared, but the terrain felt familiar: switchbacks, muddy hollows, old fence posts half-rotted in the earth. After about 2 hours, I reached the overlook, and it was worth it. A wide-open view of the endless green folds of the mountains rolling into the haze. That's when I saw him down in the tree line. Near the creek was a boy, maybe 10 years old, shirtless, standing perfectly still, looking straight up at me. Waved. He didn't move. I made it back to camp just before dusk. The fire pit had been disturbed, not destroyed, just ... moved. Rocks shifted, ash scattered, like someone had poked around and then tried to reset it. I called out, more annoyed than scared. Hey, if you're messing with my camp, just knock it off. Silence. I stayed up late, listening. No voice, no footsteps, just the rustle of wind. Eventually I dozed off in my chair beside the fire. When I woke up around 3 a.m., everything was dark. My flashlight was missing. Not stolen, just ... gone. I heard the creek, not the soft trickle it usually made, but louder, like rushing water. I walked down maybe 30 feet and stopped dead in my tracks. There he was again, the boy, standing in the middle of the water. Not wet, not moving, just staring at me. I raised my voice, louder this time. Are you okay? Nothing. When I took a step forward, he sank, straight down like the creek bed swallowed him whole. I left the next morning. He didn't pack up right. I didn't even finish my coffee. I just threw things in the Jeep and got out, but I couldn't let it go. Back in town, I stopped at the local general store, the kind with more bait than bread, and asked the man at the counter if anyone had ever mentioned a boy by the creek. He went quiet, looked at me like I'd told him his dog could talk. Finally he said, "You weren't camped near Shaw's Crossing, were you?" I nodded. He chewed the inside of his cheek. "You see him then, the boy?" I waited. He drowned. There, he finally said, 1984, went missing during a church picnic. They searched for days, found his body 2 miles downstream, face down in a hollow. Folks say he still wanders that creek. Looks for someone to help him, or maybe to take with him. I never went back. But the dreams followed me. Wet footprints on hardwood floors. A voice outside my window. Help me ... Kit. Always the same. I wake up, heart pounding, the sheets damp with sweat. The smell of moss and creek water in my nose. The boy is always waiting. Somewhere just past sleep, next time you hear a child's voice in the mountains, don't follow it.